Welcome to Snailstoryy, where we tell love stories slowly but truly. How are you today? Is the sun shining where you are? Or is it one of those breezy, quiet days? Wherever you are, I hope the next few minutes will be a gentle pause. Just for your heart. Have you ever loved someone not because they were perfect, but because when you were with them, you felt like you could simply be yourself, no masks, no pressure? A millionaire followed his son's nanny after work and discovered the truth is the story of a successful CEO who shut down his heart after loss, and a woman carrying quiet wounds but who never stopped loving others. They met because of a child. They drifted apart because of doubt. And only when trust was rebuilt did they realize that family isn't always where we're born, but where we choose to return. If you believe that kindness can heal, and that real love can begin again from the smallest of things, then this story is for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story we share slowly and sincerely. Seattle in November held a quiet kind of beauty. The rain didn't pour, it drifted, soft and fine, like someone gently running a hand down the window pane. The droplets were more like mist than water, falling steadily all day, like a wordless melody humming on and on. Carvin stood on the steps of his ivory-toned mansion. The collar of his dark overcoat raised slightly against the chill. His tall, lean figure seemed carved into the dusk. His gaze lingered on the end of the cobblestone path, where Fiona Harper's small frame was hurrying through the front gate, her thin coat already soaked halfway through. Fiona. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to stop her. She turned. Her pale blue eyes looked tired beneath the fragmented glow of the yellow porch light filtered through the rain. Her brown hair was tied neatly back, though a few strands had come loose and clung to her cheek. She adjusted the strap of her canvas bag on her shoulder, her breath catching just slightly. "Is there something you need, Mr. Blake?" she asked, her voice even almost distant. Carvin stepped down to stairs, stopping a few feet away. He wasn't used to talking much easy, not asking questions. But something about tonight tugged at him. "You've been leaving right after your shift ends lately," he said quietly. "I just wondered if something's going on, something I should know." Fiona didn't answer right away. She turned her head toward the iron gate where the faint streetlights blinked like lost stars. The rain softened, but the wind felt sharper. "My shift ends at 6, sir," she said, without facing him. "I have personal matters to take care of. I believe I have the right to do so." "I'm not accusing you of anything," Carvin replied, his voice lowering. "Last night I overheard you on the phone. In the laundry room, you said you needed a large amount of money, and that you had no one left to ask." Fiona's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. Her shoulders tensed not from the cold, perhaps, but from something more vulnerable. "That was a private conversation," she said firmly. "I don't think I owe you an explanation." "Maybe not," Carvin exhaled. "But you're taking care of my daughter. Daisy adores you. She's laughed more since you arrived. She calls you the soft-voiced fairy. If something's wrong, I need to know." This time, Fiona turned back. Her eyes were no longer tired. They were guarded. "If you no longer trust me," she said, calm but resolute, "you can hire someone else." Simple words. But they struck Carvin like a quiet blade. A soft rejection, yet it sliced straight into the old wound he never truly healed, the loss of his wife. Fiona turned again. Her boots splashed gently into a puddle on the sidewalk. Her silhouette quickly disappeared through the iron gate, leaving behind a cold, aching silence. Carvin remained there for a long while, listening to the rain fall on the roof, the steps, and deep inside him, soundless but present. Inside the wide, echoing mansion, the antique clock in the living room ticked evenly, indifferent. Carvin poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat by the tall window that looked out onto the garden. Rain traced faint shadows on the glass, reflecting the lonely figure of a man still trapped in the shadows of his past. He had designed his life the same way he built his company clean. Controlled, calculated. It's nothing outside his blueprint. But Fiona Harper had entered like a fog-covered detour. She didn't smile often, but her eyes were kind. She never spoke lofty things, but she knew how to quiet Daisy's cries in the night, how to pick the right story to lull her to sleep, how to guide her tiny fingers to draw her mother's smile in green crayon. That morning, Carvin had stood quietly in the hallway, watching unseen as Daisy, still in her dinosaur pajamas, reached for Fiona's hand and whispered, "Can you stay until I fall asleep?" Fiona had knelt down, her voice like a lullaby. "Not tonight, sweetheart, but I'll be here early tomorrow, I promise." Daisy hugged her stuffed rabbit and nodded, her eyes glowing under the soft lamp. And in that moment, Carvin felt his heart truly beat for the first time in years. A fragile, quiet beat, but it was alive. Still, that phone call from last night haunted him. "I need it soon. Please. I have no one else. I'm trying my best. Don't give up on me." There had been no mention of accidents, illnesses, or family crises. Just desperation. And money. He'd heard voices like that before. After Jennifer. After Amelia. After the newspapers printed his net worth and people started approaching not for who he was, but for what he had. Carvin hesitated, then walked toward the security console. He rarely touched it for personal matters. But this time, he had to know. The screen lit up. He rewound. Footage from the day before. Fiona appeared on time, walked Daisy to the garden, helped her tie her hair, read to her. Nothing unusual. Except the call. Fiona stood in the backyard, phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her voice urgent, but not panicked. "I'm working day and night. I'm not stealing anything. I just need more time. Please, don't cut me off." Carvin muted the feed. But he could still hear the desperation etched into her tilted face. It wasn't fear, it was pressure. He set the glass down, stood up. For the first time in years, he didn't want to be the man who watched in silence and doubted everything. He couldn't let quietness ruin something that was just beginning, however fragile. The black Mercedes rolled past the gate. Carvin turned off the headlights and followed the path Fiona had taken. Seattle's sky was still weeping its soft rain. The streetlights blurred like an old dream. He wasn't sure if he was looking for answers or trying to believe again. But tonight, he would follow her. And maybe, just maybe, tonight would change everything. The Seattle night was thick, like watered-down ink, neither fully dark nor truly lit. Narrow streets wove between rows of old brick buildings, stretching beneath dim yellow lamps. The rain softening everything into silk. The black Mercedes moved slowly, almost soundlessly, blending into the sparse traffic. Carvin kept one hand on the wheel, eyes fixed on the small figure a few hundred meters ahead, Fiona Harper. Her canvas bag pressed close to her chest, her steps brisk but steady, as if she was used to walking in the night, in the cold, and in solitude. He didn't know what he was doing. Part of him insisted it was wrong following the woman who had brought laughter back into his daughter's life, but something deeper overruled it. He needed to know, not to control her, but because he was afraid. Afraid of losing one more good thing. Fiona turned into a bus stop. A silver bus pulled up, doors hissing open. She stepped in without looking back. Carvin pressed the accelerator lightly, driving parallel from a distance, quietly keeping pace. The bus headed south, away from the wealthy part of town. The sleek glass buildings faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by squat, aging structures with cracked walls and flickering neon signs in weary reds and blues. The rain continued, not harder, just endlessly. Finally, Fiona stepped off at a quiet corner. where a crooked sign blinked under the streetlight. Sunrise Hope Center, because every child deserves a morning. Carvin pulled over on the opposite side, his heart clenched. She hadn't gone to a bank, or a pawn shop, or to meet someone. She had gone to teach. The glass door swung open. An older woman with neatly tied gray hair greeted her with a quick hug and a warm smile. Inside, golden light spilled over threadbare rugs, children's drawings taped to the walls, and leaning bookshelves filled with hand-me-down stories. Fiona entered a large room where about 24 children were coloring, reading, building Legos on the floor. No one screamed, but the air was filled with the quiet hum of joy. Carvin saw her slip off her coat and kneel beside a boy arranging wooden blocks, her mouth curving into a soft smile. From her canvas bag, she pulled out a box of crayons, some picture books, and a few hand-folded paper dolls. A shy little girl in an oversized sweatshirt clutched a tattered stuffed animal and stepped hesitantly toward her. Fiona said nothing, just offered her a crayon and began drawing a house with a garden of wildflowers. The girl sat beside her, touched the paper gently, and smiled. Carvin felt a tightness in his chest. She had nothing and gave everything. Another boy sneezed. Fiona immediately unwound the wool scarf from her neck and wrapped it gently around his. Carvin recognized the scarf. It was the one she often sat knitting on his porch bench during quiet afternoons. She hadn't been knitting for herself. She had been knitting for these kids. Carvin remained in his car for nearly an hour, watching through the misted window. He saw Fiona button up a little girl's coat, saw her use tape to mend the sole of a boy's torn shoe, saw her laugh not politely, not guardedly, but freely, as though this place was home, and for the first time, Carvin felt something stir in him. Was it shame? Admiration? Both. In the passenger seat, a box of pastries from his private chef lay untouched. He looked at it, then slowly tore off a sheet of paper and wrote, "For the kids. From someone who believes in them." The handwriting was neat and round. He slipped the note inside, stepped out into the rain, crossed the street silently, and placed the box at the center's doorstep before walking back to the car. Unseen. From his seat, he watched Fiona come outside moments later. She bent down, surprised, picked up the box. Read the note. And then she smiled. Not a polite smile, but a smile like a fireplace in winter. She pressed one hand to her chest, right where her heart was, and held it there for a moment. Carvin leaned back in his seat. There was no more doubt in him. Number? More reason to follow. Only a quiet ache, regret, that he hadn't trusted her sooner. He exhaled softly, watching the rain blur against the windshield. Something inside him, something long frozen, was slowly beginning to melt. Fiona Harper. The woman he once thought mysterious was the gentlest light he'd ever seen, and he began to understand why. Daisy called her the soft-voiced fairy. The rain had stopped by morning. The sky over Seattle wasn't sunny, but it was softly bright. Droplets lingered on the window frames, carrying the damp chill of the night before. In the pristine white kitchen of the Blake residence, the soft clinking of a spoon against porcelain echoed rhythmically. Carvin sat at the table, stirring his coffee but never taking a sip. His eyes followed Fiona as she moved about the kitchen, preparing breakfast for Daisy, wearing the same cream-colored apron, her hair tied back in the same neat, low ponytail. But today, something was different. Fiona walked in with the faintest smile on her lips, not bright, but gentle, not guarded, but calm in a way that felt rare. In her hands was a pastry box, wrapped carefully in a brown paper bag, a small note taped to the front for the kids. From someone who believes in them. She placed the box on the table where Carvin sat. This, she said not accusingly, but not casually either, was left at the center last night. Carvin looked at the box. The same ribbon he had tied. the same handwriting. But he only gave a quiet smile, neither confirming nor denying. "Did the kids like it?" he asked. "They squealed like someone had brought them treasure," Fiona replied, her smile blooming just a little more, visible now in her eyes. One little boy even slipped 2 pastries into his pocket to save for tomorrow. Carvin chuckled a rare smile, one that came without effort. "Then I suppose that someone did a kind thing." Fiona nodded. "I think so too." Breakfast passed with a gentle, almost sacred peace. Daisy whispered to Fiona about the tiny brown squirrel she saw dart across the lawn the day before. Fiona feigned amazement, as if squirrels were magical creatures she had never seen before, making Daisy burst into delighted giggles. The laughter of a child filled the kitchen, a place that used to hold only the hiss of the espresso machine and silence. Carvin sat there, quietly listening, eyes never straying from the two of them. For a moment, his heart tightened, not from sorrow, but from the flood of things rushing in at once: loss, regret, and the quiet flicker of a newfound faith. That afternoon, after Fiona had cleaned up the kitchen and was preparing to leave, she paused at the door. "Mr. Blake?" she said, a slight hesitation in her voice. "Yes." Carvin looked up from his laptop. "Thank you," she said, her eyes steady, but her voice soft. "For what?" "For the pastry box." She paused. "I'm not certain it was you, but if it was, thank you." Carvin smiled so faintly it could have been missed if one wasn't watching closely. "I believe that person holds you in very high regard," he said. "Not many people could do what you do." Fiona studied him for a moment, then gave a quiet nod. "Daisy sleeps soundly since you came," he added, just as she reached for the door. "She dreams of good things." "That was something my wife tried very hard to make happen, but never had the chance." Fiona turned back gently. She didn't offer condolences, didn't pretend to understand his grief. She simply stood there, nodded. Again, like the two of them had exchanged a silent promise. Wordless but true. That afternoon, a pale sun peeked through the clouds. For the first time in years, Carvin crossed the street to a tiny toy store. He chose a set of colorful wooden building blocks not for Daisy, but for the children he'd never met at Sunrise Hope. That night, after Fiona had left, he placed the wrapped gift beside the exit with a new note, for Daisy and her friends. From someone who believes in play. No name, no signature, no need for acknowledgement. He just needed to do something, because for the first time in a very long while, he felt something stirring inside, like a seed breaking through cold, compacted soil. The next morning, Fiona found the gift at the door. She turned the box over in her hands, opened it, and gasped softly. Oh, a full set of wooden blocks, colorful and smooth. Her eyes lit up. She knew this wasn't a gift for just Daisy but for all of them. "This isn't cheap," she whispered, running a gentle hand across the polished wood. And it's not thoughtless either." Beside her, Daisy's eyes grew wide. "Is it for me, Miss Fiona?" "It's for you," Fiona said. "And for the friends you haven't met yet. However, left it must believe you'll share." Daisy nodded solemnly, as if she understood completely. Carvin stood in the kitchen, watching from afar. He said nothing. He didn't need to. He had begun to give not from abundance, but from the heart. And sometimes the truest gifts need no sender's name, because they carry their own light. Saturday afternoon brought rare sunlight to Seattle. Not dazzling, just a gentle glow, like a veil of sheer fabric draped lightly across the sky. In the garden behind the Blake estate, the lavender bushes stretched themselves toward the light. After days of cold rain, Daisy sat on the stone bench, coloring in a picture book, her little hands carefully choosing shades. Not far from her, Fiona tended to the young basil plants she'd picked up from the weekend farmer's market. Carvin stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand. He had thought many times about walking out to sit with them. But every time, something held him back, an old habit etched into him over the years. The habit of watching warmth from a distance. He saw Fiona remove her gardening gloves and walk toward Daisy, gently settling down beside her. "Ah!" They whispered something and burst out. Laughing together, Daisy leaned into her shoulder, still clutching a green crayon. In that moment, Fiona was no longer just a nanny. She was something closer, something more familiar. Carvin set down his coffee and walked out into the garden. Fiona looked up as he approached. She nodded, her eyes soft like sunlight on grass. "The basil looks healthy," Carvin said, pointing at the vibrant green leaves. "You've got a good touch." "Not really," Fiona smiled. "I've just cared for things that needed a long time to survive." It was a passing comment, but Carvin heard something beneath the words. Something he hadn't asked about. Maybe it was time. "Fiona," he said, sitting down on the wooden bench across from her. "You've never told me why you really chose this work." Looking after kids, working at the center. Fiona hesitated. Her fingers brushed the worn leather bracelet. She always wore something she never talked about. She looked at him, then up at the sky, where soft clouds drifted slowly. "I grew up in the foster care system," she said. Her voice was calm, but not empty. "When I was 6, my mom got arrested for theft. I had no one left. They moved me through 12 different homes in 10 years. Carvin said nothing. Somewhere in the distance, a small sparrow chirped. "No one ever hit me," Fiona continued. "But no one really saw me either. I was quiet, well-behaved. I didn't cause trouble because I was afraid of being sent away." She smiled, but it was a smile carved with old cuts. "There was one person, Miss Angela. She was a volunteer who came to read to us once a week. She brought cookies and old comic books. She was only there for a year, but I never forgot her." Fiona took a deep breath. "I guess I always thought if a stranger could plant a little bit of light in my life, maybe I could do the same for someone else." Carvin's hand curled slowly into a fist. What rose inside him wasn't pity. It was understanding. "I lost my wife in 3 months," he said, eyes fixed on Fiona. "Ovarian cancer. Caught too late. Too fast to stop." For the first time, Fiona didn't look away. She listened. She was the light in every room, Carvin said quietly. And when she left, Daisy started fearing the dark. She had nightmares without her mom. His voice wavered, but he didn't stop. "And I started closing every door. No one in, not even Daisy. I told myself I was protecting her. But really, I was hiding." A soft breeze rustled the lavender, their purple petals trembling. Daisy was still sitting in the grass, humming a tune under her breath. Fiona's voice came gently. "We're all survivors in our own way." "Yeah," Carvin nodded. "And I think we're both afraid of being seen too clearly." Fiona smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid of being seen. I'm afraid of being hurt because of it." In that moment, they were no longer employer and employee, no longer past and present. Just two people in a fall garden, each carrying their own quiet crackspot, still sitting upright, still open, still alive. Daisy ran over, holding out a drawing. "Daddy, look. It's Miss Fiona, me, and Mommy, up in the sky." She pointed at the colored scribbles. "I drew Mommy with a glowing hat." Carvin leaned down to see. The picture had no proportion, no perspective. But it was beautiful. Fiona smiled, resting a hand on Daisy's shoulder. "You are the light," she whispered. Carvin looked at them, and in that moment, he thought, maybe she's the light I forgot I needed to. Monday afternoon, golden. Light slanted through the clear window panes, spilling across the wooden floor of Carvin's study like a soft carpet. Daisy had just gone down for her nap, and Fiona was sitting at the kitchen counter, slowly flipping through a slim brochure. an informational packet for a part-time program in special education she had stumbled upon the day before. Carvin stepped. In steam rising from the tea he carried, he saw her reading intently, a brightness in her eyes, kind he had only seen in those who truly carried dreams inside them. "You thinking about applying to that program?" he asked, Fiona, startled, slightly folding the packet closed. "Just considering," she replied, a little flustered. "It's a 2-year course, only on weekends, but I'm not sure if I can manage it financially." Carvin sat across from her, quiet for a moment, as if weighing something carefully. Then he spoke slowly, clearly. "Fiona, I'd like to offer you a new position. Officially. As household manager." Fiona blinked. The position would come with a higher salary, more flexible hours. You'd be able to attend classes, still care for Daisy, and you wouldn't need to rush out every evening. The silence that followed was gentle, but tense-like. A string pulled just tight enough to tremble. Fiona looked at him. Her eyes weren't rejecting the offer, but they were wary as if an old memory had stirred awake. "Why me?" she asked. "Because Daisy needs you. You make her feel safe." "And he paused. "I trust you, and I want to help." Fiona's hands wrapped around the warm mug of tea. "You don't have to help me, Carvin," she said, calling him by his first name for the very first time. "I know," he replied. "I want to." Silence returned, not uncomfortable, but heavy. Like the moment before something delicate tips over. "When I was a kid," Fiona said slowly, in the group home. "Any time someone did something kind for me, I always wondered, what do they want in return?" Carvin looked up. "It took me years to stop thinking that way. But even now, when someone reaches out, my first instinct is to pull back." Her voice wasn't sad, but it was thin, fragile, honest. "I understand," Carvin said. "But this isn't pity, Fiona. This is respect, gratitude." Fiona pressed her lips together. Her fingers gently turned the worn leather bracelet around her wrist. "If I say yes," she whispered, "I'm afraid I'll never know whether I earned what I have or just walked a path someone else laid out for me." Carvin stood, walking to the glass door, looking out at the garden where Daisy was playing with her tiny dolls. His voice dropped lower, quieter. "You know, I built an entire tech empire from nothing, but I've never once felt like I deserved it. Only that I survived." He turned back to her, his eyes softer now, the eyes of a CEO, but of a man who had once lost everything. "And now, I don't want to just survive anymore. I want to do something meaningful. And that starts with believing in someone good." Fiona sat still. Part of her wanted to trust, to say yes, to feel relief. But another part, the part that had been turned away, misunderstood, and forced to cling to independence like a lifeline, still trembled at the touch of kindness. "I need time," she said softly. "Of course," Carvin replied. But 2 days later, while preparing dinner, Fiona left a small folded note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for the offer. I truly appreciate it. But I have to decline. I need to walk on my own feet. I hope you understand." The handwriting was round, precise like everything she did. Carvin read it, then stood still by the window as the evening light faded slowly across the trees. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disappointed. He felt something quieter than that. Respect. Fiona hadn't taken the easy road, and that was exactly why he trusted her more than ever. What Carvin didn't know, though, was that from this choice, a greater trial was already approaching, one that would force both him and Fiona to confront their deepest fear, losing trust, and from that fracture, a part of their hearts would break open just enough to learn how to love again, even if it meant loving through the pain. Seattle had turned unusually cold. The wind whispered through bare branches, brushing over rooftops like the weary sigh of the season. Inside the Blake estate, the atmosphere had changed as well, quieter, tighter, as if something invisible was shifting. Emily's necklace, the last keepsake Carvin had of his late wife, vanished without warning one morning. It had always been tucked safely in a locked drawer in his study, kept like a fragment of memory he was never quite ready to face. Now, 'twas gone. Carvin searched the house silently. Drawer by drawer, cabinet by cabinet, everything was in place. Except that one drawer. The housekeeper hadn't been in his study for 3 days. Only one person had entered, Fiona Harper. She had cleaned the room on Thursday while he was out, while Daisy was asleep. When the house had held only 2 people, a little girl and the woman he had come to trust, Carvin wanted to believe in her. But that old, cold instinct crept in, the same one he'd ignored once and paid dearly for. A familiar survival reflex, forged from betrayal. That night, an anonymous email arrived at the Sunrise Hope Center. Just one sentence, sharp as a blade. Fiona Harper is using the children to solicit donations. Check your records. She's profiting off pity. No name, no proof. But suspicion doesn't need facts to spread. It only needs air. Helen, the director of the center, called Fiona with gentle concern. But Fiona knew. She could feel it in the way a few parents looked at her the next morning. No accusations, no words, just the quiet question behind every glance. Could she be lying? Fiona said nothing. She continued working. She read stories, tied shoelaces, wiped tears. But her chest was heavy. And then, that afternoon, when she returned to the Blake residence, she met Carvin's eyes. They weren't the same eyes that watched her prepare Daisy's breakfast with quiet warmth. "Is something wrong?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. Carvin was silent for a long time. Then he asked, softly, "Did you go into my study on Thursday?" Fiona nodded. "I did. I clean it every week." "Did you happen to see a small wooden box in the drawer?" She looked at him, realizing she didn't ask which box. She didn't pretend. She just looked. And from his eyes, she understood. "You think I took it?" she said quietly. "No, I'm just asking." Carvin hesitated. "No," Fiona interrupted. "You're not asking. You're accusing." The air froze. Fiona didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at him, straight through him, with a silence sharper than shouting. "There are security cameras, aren't there?" she said. Carvin didn't reply, and that silence was the loudest verdict of all. Fiona said nothing more. She turned, walking away slow but steady. As she passed Daisy's room, she paused, gazing at the little pink shoes by the bed. Then, without a word, she stepped out the door. No goodbye, no suitcase. Just her old canvas bag. Carvin stood in his study for a long time after that, the useless drawer key still clenched in his fist. A voice inside him whispered, "This doesn't feel right. This isn't her." But another voice, the one scarred by past betrayals, answered, "People hide who they really are, until you let your guard down." 3 days later, Carvin opened Daisy's small dresser drawer, searching for a missing crayon box. And there, tucked inside a hand-embroidered handkerchief with a sun stitched on the corner, was the necklace. And next to it, card dot written in crayon in Daisy's uneven handwriting, "For Miss Fiona for Christmas. So she has something pretty, like Mommy." Carvin froze. The chill that ran down his spine wasn't from the cold. It was from within, from the place where he realized he had just hurt the one person who had done nothing wrong. That night, sitting in his car outside the Sunrise Hope Center, Carvin stared at the warm yellow light spilling from the windows. Inside, Fiona sat with the children, reading. She still smiled. But it wasn't the same smile. In his hands was the necklace, now returned to its wooden box, and a letter. "I was wrong. Not just for doubting you, but for letting you walk away without asking you to stay." He didn't know if he would be forgiven, but he knew this much. He didn't start with honesty. Then nothing that followed would matter, and for the first time in years, Carvin knocked on a doorknob to offer a job, but to say he was sorry. Not because he held power, but because he had lost the one person who knew how to love in the right way. Asterisk, there's a stillness to Seattle at night that belongs only to this city. Not as silent as a small town, yet never as exhausting as a restless metropolis. Everything here I've end, regret moves with a certain patience, quiet persistence. Across the street from the Sunrise Hope Community Center, a black car sat parked under the dim amber glow of a street lamp. From within, warm honey-colored light spilled softly through the misted windows. Carvin sat behind the wheel, a small wooden box resting in his lap. Inside it was a necklace, the very one he had once accused Fiona of stealing. Next to it was a letter, its handwriting neat, precise. Fiona, in case you still want to read. He didn't know what he was going to say. He only knew that if he didn't come here, if he didn't face her, if he didn't admit he was wrong, then what he lost wouldn't just be a nanny, or a trusted hand, or even a good person. It would be the one thing that had helped him and his daughter feel alive again after so many quiet, broken years. The door to the center was still open. He knocked gently. A small boy peeked out, recognized him, smiled shyly, and ran to call someone. A minute later, Fiona appeared at the threshold. Wearing a faded sweater, her sleeve stained faintly with orange paint from craft hour. She looked at him, not surprised, not cold, just tired. Carvin held the box out toward her. Daisy tucked this away, he said. She wanted to give it to you for your birthday. She thought it was something beautiful. Fiona opened the box. Inside was the necklace, and a crayon scrawled. Note from Daisy. She said nothing, didn't cry. She simply sat down on the front step quietly, as if a storm inside her had finally passed, leaving only the soft, muddy aftermath. Carvin sat beside her, a respectful distance. Close enough not to be distant, but far enough not to intrude. I'm sorry, he said, voice low like autumn wind. Not just for doubting you, but for failing to believe what I've seen with my own eyes for months. Fiona looked down at her hands. A smear of orange paint clung beneath her thumbnail. She rubbed it gently with her thumb, as if trying to scrub something deeper. You didn't ask, she said. You just looked at me like I was someone else, someone who had hurt you before. Carvin nodded. I was afraid of it happening again, and I let that fear speak louder than reason. Fiona didn't argue. She quietly placed the necklace into her canvas bag. After a long silence, she spoke. There was an anonymous email sent to the center. Said I was using the kids to solicit donations, that I was turning pity into profit. Carvin looked up. I didn't know. It's all right, she said with a tired smile. The center still stands by me. Helen still believes in me. But some of the parents, their eyes were different, and that hurts more than anything I've faced in 3 years of teaching. She gripped her bag strapped tightly. Her voice faltered. And then you doubted me, too? Carvin swallowed hard. He wanted to say, I'll investigate that email, but he stayed quiet, 'cause in this moment, she didn't need a promise. She needed space and time for her heart to mend on its own terms. I used to believe, Fiona whispered, that real kindness would speak for itself. But sometimes it's drowned out by louder accusations. Carvin turned to her. Then let me be someone who speaks with you. The wind picked up. From inside the center, a few children's voices sang softly. Fiona sat a little straighter, her eyes gazing out to the street. Do you know why I didn't defend myself? She asked. Because you knew the truth would come through, he replied. She nodded slightly. And because if I spoke out in anger, I'd lose something more important myself. Carvin studied her, his voice quieter than before. I used to think safety meant control, walls, locks, protection. But then I met you, and Daisy met you. And I realized maybe the safest thing is learning how to let go of doubt. They didn't speak for a while. They just sat, listening to leaves rustling. Along the sidewalk, a bike passing in the distance, and the soft echo of children's voices behind them. You are my sunshine. It's my only sunshine, Carvin stood. I'll find out who sent that email, he said. Not because you need to be cleared, but because justice deserves to be heard. And if I'm the only one who will stand beside, why will? Fiona rose too. The wind caught the edge of her coat. She looked at him for the first time, really looking. Then this time, she said softly, "Stay long enough for someone to believe you mean it." Carvin nodded. No further explanation. He understood. Forgiveness doesn't come all at once. But it can begin with an honest apology, with someone choosing to stay, not retreat, and that night, for the first time in weeks. Fiona walked back into the center with her head held high, her eyes steady. She didn't need a public clearing of her name, because truth doesn't need to kneel. It simply stands. As for Carvin, he didn't pull up his laptop to comb through code. He did what a real CEO would do. The moment he left the center, he called the head of internal investigations at Blake and Morrow. Within 48 hours, his elite cybersecurity team traced the IP, filtered the logs, and confirmed the sender's identity. It was a former partner, someone whose financial proposals had been rejected by the center. Someone with motive, and a history of smearing others when things didn't go their way. Carvin didn't shout. It didn't threaten. He simply signed the final report and sent it to the center's board, along with a handwritten note. Not everyone knows how to love children, but those who do deserve to be protected. He didn't do it to save face or out of pride. He did it for the woman he nearly lost, the one who had loved Daisy with her whole, unbroken heart, the one who deserved to be trusted. Just as she had chosen to trust in light even on her darkest days. There was something different in the air. The evening at the Sunrise Hope Center. It wasn't just the new golden light bulbs or the handcrafted ribbons the children had strung across the walls. It was something quieter: warmth, closeness, and beneath it all, anticipation. It was the center's annual fundraising night, a gathering where the community came to hear stories, share laughter, and offer support to children often forgotten by the world. Inside the modest hall, rows of simple wooden chairs were dressed in white fabric. On stage, a hand-painted cardboard sign read, "Hope is something we can build together." Backstage, Fiona stood in a soft sky-blue dress that gently hugged her slender frame. She wasn't used to the spotlight. But tonight, she had been asked to speak as the initiator of the new program for children with disabilities. Her hands trembled slightly around the microphone, but her voice was steady. I didn't grow up with breakfast tables or Christmas trees. But there was once someone who came to read to me every week, who brought cookies and a gentle smile. I guess if someone once did something kind for you, you can do that for someone else. The hall fell silent. Fiona continued, her eyes shining with something close to gratitude. And then I met someone. Someone who didn't just help me believe I was enough, but reminded me that sometimes wounds don't need to be erased. They just need to be seen and honored. There were murmurs in the crowd. Eyes turned toward the front row where Carvin Blake sat quietly, Daisy's hand resting inside his. Fiona glanced down at a small folded paper in her hand. A note written in crooked handwriting by a little boy. "Miss Fiona, your hope with brown hair." She smiled softly and closed her speech with a whisper more than a declaration. "Thank you to the one who gave me the courage to believe that the past doesn't have to define the future." Applause followed, not thunderous, but full, real. A few guests wiped away quiet tears, And then the event host stepped onto the stage, holding the microphone with a playful glint in her eyes. "We have a very special guest who'd like to say a few words, and maybe more than just a few." Carvin rose. Fiona froze. He walked toward the stage with quiet, measured steps, each one carved from the resolve he'd been building for days. He wore a black suit, no tie, holding a small folded paper. His voice was warm, grounded, and free of pretense. "My name is Carvin Blake. Some of you may know me as a CEO, but tonight, I'm just the father of a little girl named Daisy, and a man who had lost faith in kindness until I met her." Fiona lowered her head. She didn't know whether to smile or cry. Fiona Harper walked into my home not with a glowing resume, but with a heart big enough to love a child who didn't trust easily and a father who didn't open up easily. He paused. "I doubted her. I was wrong. And I nearly lost someone who never should have been lost." Behind him, Daisy ran up the stage, grabbing the edge of Fiona's dress with her tiny hands. "Miss Fiona, can I say something?" she asked, and when Fiona nodded, Daisy turned to the room. "You're my new mommy." The hall fell into stunned silence. Then, like a wave, applause rose soft at first, then spreading. Full of warmth, Carvin bent down, pulling a white velvet box from his coat pocket. He didn't rush. His eyes glistened as he looked at her. "Fiona Harper, you forgave a man who didn't deserve it. You taught me how to believe again, not through logic, but through your quiet, daily presence. I love you. And I want to spend the rest of my life earning that love." He knelt, opening the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, elegant, timeless, engraved with 3 tiny letters. CFD. Carvin, Fiona, Daisy. "Will you marry me?" Fiona stood, her heart spilling over in every direction. She looked at him not as a wealthy man, but as a once wounded soul, now learning how to love for real. She nodded. Tears streamed down. "Yes, I will." Daisy clapped first, then the children of the center, then the entire room. Carvin rose, wrapping Fiona and Daisy into his arms. No music played, no glitter fell. Just applause and the kind of looks that only come when hearts are wide open. Then Carvin returned to the microphone, his voice now glowing with pride. "I'm proud to announce the creation of the Fiona Harper Funda Scholarship, dedicated to children from disadvantaged backgrounds, giving them the chance to study community education. Because the world needs more people like her." Fiona looked at him, her hands still holding Daisy's, and for the first time she didn't just feel love, she felt seen. She felt chosen. She felt whole. Early spring in Seattle had a quiet beauty. The rain had softened, the sun hadn't yet grown harsh, and the trees just brushing the edge of their green. Dreams stood shy and gentle under the open sky. The house on the hill was still the same, spacious, solemn, with stone walls and windows that nearly touched the ceiling. But inside, everything had changed in the subtlest, most meaningful ways. In the kitchen, Daisy was coloring an empty cookie tin with bright markers. "It's my dream house," she declared, then turned to Fiona, eyes sparkling. "It has a backyard for stray cats, and a swing chair where Mommy can read books." Fiona laughed, the kind of laugh soft as ripe wheat. "And will you let Daddy grow vegetables?" "Only carrots," Daisy said. "But Mommy can't make him eat green stuff every day, okay?" Fiona mock frowned. A temporary truce. Then she bent down and gently kissed her daughter's hair. Happiness didn't arrive like fireworks. It came like morning light through a quiet window, soft, unnoticed but steady. The living room had recently been redone. Not with grandeur, but with meaning. A wooden bookshelf, built by Carvin himself, stood proudly filled with Daisy's drawings, old fairy tales, and a vintage cassette player Fiona had brought from the center. On the mantel, a simple wooden photo. frame held their first picture together, Fiona leaning toward a giggling Daisy, while Carvin stood beside them, eyes locked on the only two people who made him feel like he belonged. Carvin used to live in that house like it was a fortress. Now, it was no longer a shelter for grief, but a space for growing, for laughing, for being whole. Fiona hadn't quit her work at the center. If anything, she expanded it, planning a new skills class for at-risk teens alongside Helen. But this time, she didn't have to do it alone. Carvin didn't interfere. He simply showed up at the right moments with market research, with funding connections, with a design team that gave Sunrise Hope its first proper brand identity since opening its doors. "You're the fire," he told her once, sitting beside her in the home office. "I'm just here to keep the wind from blowing it out." Daisy adapted faster than anyone had expected. She still dreamed of her first mom, still clutched the same worn teddy bear that once no one was allowed to touch unless they passed the kindness test. Now, the bear wore 2 new ribbons, one blue, Mommy Fiona's dress color, and one gray, Daddy Carvin's jacket color when he asked Mommy to marry him. One afternoon, Fiona gently asked, "How do you feel having a new mommy?" Daisy thought for a long moment, then answered, "It's like I have another place to go when I'm sad." One rainy evening, the three of them skipped the fancy dining room instead. They laid a blanket across the living room floor, placed a hot pot in the middle, and turned on old jazz tapes. Daisy fell asleep halfway through a cookie Carvin carried her to bed, while Fiona stayed behind, slowly turning her now cold cocoa in one hand. When he returned, he sat beside her in silence. Their bare feet brushed under the blanket. "I used to think," Carvin said softly, "that the hardest part was learning to trust. But it turns out the hardest part is holding on to what you once doubted." Fiona didn't reply right away. She tilted her head and looked at him. "And do you think you've done that?" Carvin nodded slightly, not completely. "But I'm learning every day." Fiona smiled. "Then that's enough." One Saturday morning, Carvin crouched in the backyard, adjusting the ropes of Daisy's new swing. Fiona came out with coffee, standing behind him for a long moment. "I've got a question," she said. "Shoot," he answered, glancing up. "Why did you never ask me to leave the center, or work for the company, or drop school?" Carvin smiled, half bitter, half gentle. "Because I knew you were stronger than me. And strong people don't need to be molded. They just need to be respected." Fiona sat down beside him. The breeze was soft, carrying lavender from the windowsill. "Then today," she said, "can you help me with this?" She handed him a sketch, a logo design for her upcoming street education program. He didn't ask questions, just held it up to the light. "Together," he said. "Always." That night, in Fiona's journal beside her bed, a new line appeared, written in blue ink. "Home isn't a place. It's having someone you trust enough to take down the walls." Below it, another line in neater handwriting. "And when that someone trusts you back." That late afternoon, the sun turned golden, a kind of light as clear as honey, falling gently over soft grass, making everything from the window frames to the lavender tips seem dusted in quiet magic. Daisy sat in the backyard, tracing shapes in the soil with a stick. She was drawing 3 figures, each with different hair, the same wide smiles, and above them, a crooked sun and the words, "My forever family." Fiona stood behind the glass door, a mug of ginger tea in her hands. She watched the scene, but didn't step out right away. A feeling stirred in her chest, not bursting joy, but something gentler, like peace. Like everything had finally found its rightful place. Carvin came up behind her, wrapping a soft shawl around her shoulders. "No classes at Sunrise Hope today, Teacher Fiona?" he asked, voice as light as breeze. "No," she smiled, turning to him. "I took the day off." I wanted to remember what a quiet day felt like. Carvin raised an eyebrow. A quiet day. Yeah, I used to dream about a day like this. No saving the world. No counting every dollar. Just someone beside me and a little girl drawing a home in the sunset. He said nothing. He just took her hand and squeezed it gently. That evening, at hay, the three of them had dinner outside under strings of soft yellow lights draped between trees and the porch roof. The meal was simple: pumpkin soup, toasted bread, and a tray of cookies Daisy had made slightly burnt. But filled with love, Fiona told them about a new boy at the center. Malcolm. True struggled with depression after a car accident. Carvin listened, not as a CEO solving problems, but as a partner quietly holding space for her heart. After dinner, Daisy ran inside, then returned with a small pink envelope. She handed it to Fiona and whispered, "Mommy, I wrote a letter to my old mom. I don't want to send it anymore. Can you keep it for me?" Fiona looked at her and pulled her into a hug. No questions. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words, just permission to hold on to a memory in peace. Later that night, with Daisy asleep, Carvin and Fiona sat wrapped in a large blanket on the porch. "Are you still afraid?" he asked. Fiona thought for a few seconds. "Yes, but not of being left anymore. Just one thing." "What's that?" "I'm afraid I'll forget who I used to be." Carvin turned to her, eyes full of quiet love. "You're the one who made me believe again. The one who gave Daisy back her laughter. The one who taught forgotten children that they're allowed to dream." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "If you ever forget, I'll remind you. Every day, any way I need to." Fiona smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Months later, the new expansion wing of the Sunrise Hope Center opened. A multi-purpose classroom with sunlight-filled glass walls, a small outdoor play area, and a private therapy room. On the outside wall, a hand-painted mural showed three people holding hands beneath a cinnamon tree. Beneath the mural it read, "Where love begins again." At the ribbon cutting, Fiona didn't give a long speech, just one line. Family isn't something we're born into. It's something we choose and choose again every day. The audience went silent. Then someone clapped. Then everyone. That night, Daisy got to stay up late. She colored quietly at the kitchen table while Fiona brewed tea. Carvin placed a hand on her shoulder. "Need help with anything, Miss Fiona?" "Yes," she turned to him, her eyes sparkling. "Can you stay?" "Always." "How long is always?" "Until all the old wounds stop hurting." Carvin didn't answer. He simply nodded, then opened a nearby drawer and placed a small wooden box on the table. Fiona opened it. Inside was a soft, worn notebook. On the first page, it read, "The family we choose." Inside were scattered notes. "Daisy likes ice cream at 10 a.m. if the sun is out." "Fiona says love doesn't need conditions, just patience." "A family is where you're allowed to have a past and still be held by the present." At the very end, a small folded card, written in blue ink. "Thank you for not walking away, even when I was wrong." Outside the window, there was no rain. The young cinnamon tree in the yard had begun to bud again. Their family wasn't perfect, but they had chosen each other through trust, through healing, through every small act of showing up, and that love was still unfolding. And you've just listened to the story of Carvin, Fiona, and little Daisy, three hearts once hurt, once lost, once full of doubt, but who chose to trust again, to forgive, and to begin, not with grand gestures, but with quiet, honest acts of love. Perhaps all of us, at some point, have been afraid to love. Afraid of being seen for who we really are. But as Fiona once said, family isn't something we're born into. It's something we choose again and again. If this story touched you, if you believe that trust can be rebuilt and that Love always finds a way home. Then thank you for staying with us until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Snailstoryy, and leave a comment to share how this story made you feel. Your emotions are what keep us going slowly, but sincerely. See you again in another story, just as gentle, just as deep, and made just for your heart.